When you step outside today, you take for granted that the buildings around you will stand tomorrow. You check your phone, look at a map, and trust that the borders, cities, and streets under your feet are permanent features of the world. But imagine standing on a city wall in the 14th century, looking out at the horizon and seeing a rising cloud of dust. Imagine knowing that within hours, every home, every library, every sanctuary, and every life you have ever known will be reduced to ash. For most of history, empires were inherited by princes born in palaces. But Timur was not born to a throne. He was a shepherd's son from the dry steppes of Central Asia, raised in a chaotic land of endless tribal blood feuds. Yet before his life ended, his cavalry would ride across tens of thousands of miles, dismantling ancient empires and building towers out of human skulls. This is the story of how a wounded, paralyzed outlaw became the most terrifying conqueror of the medieval world, Tamerlane. In the spring of 1336, in the small oasis town of Kesh near Samarkand, a boy was born to a minor tribal chieftain. They named him Timur, an ancient Turkic word meaning iron. The world Timur entered was defined by a looming ghost, the shattered legacy of Genghis Khan. A century earlier, the Mongols had swept across Eurasia like a firestorm, tearing down old kingdoms and establishing a brutal continental order. But by Timur's childhood, that massive empire had fractured into warring factions, petty warlords, and nomadic tribes fighting over grazing land. Timur's father was a quiet man who sought peace in religion. But young Timur spent his days watching horsemen ride across the plains and listening to stories of past conquerors. He saw a world where a rival tribe could burn your village while you slept, and he reached a simple, brutal conclusion. In a world ruled by chaos, mercy was a fatal flaw, and absolute power belonged only to those willing to take it. By his mid-20s, Timur was neither a king nor a general, but he had already earned a reputation as a mercenary leader who could outsmart his rivals. He sold his blade to regional princes, learning the treacherous political terrain of Central Asia through blood and betrayals. During a night raid in southern Afghanistan around 1363, Timur's career almost ended before it truly began. Arrows rained down in the darkness. Two struck him deep. One shattered his right shoulder, and another tore through his right leg. He survived, but the damage was irreversible. He was left with a permanent, severe limp, and his right arm lost its full motion. His enemies mocked his handicap, calling him Timur the Lame, a name Europeans would later pronounce as Tamerlane. Where others saw a broken man, Timur saw an advantage. He realized that if physical perfection was denied to him, he would surpass every rival in tactical genius, mental endurance, and sheer ruthlessness. He adapted his riding style, trained his left hand, and transformed an insult into a name that made continents tremble. Timur understood that brute force alone could not hold power on the steppe. He needed political authority. He forged an alliance with a powerful chieftain named Emir Hussein, marrying Hussein's sister to cement their bond. Together, they drove out invading Mongol warlords and seized control of the trade center of Samarkand. For years, the two men ruled as uneasy co-rulers. But authority in Central Asia could never be divided. Timur watched his partner carefully, noting Hussein's heavy taxation and growing unpopularity among the local nobility. Timur worked in the shadows, winning the devotion of Islamic scholars, tribal elders, and common soldiers. By 1370, the alliance shattered into open war. Timur besieged Hussein at the ancient fortress of Balkh. When the walls fell, Hussein was captured and executed. At 34 years old, the lame mercenary stood alone as the ruler of Transoxiana. He declared Samarkand the capital of his realm and took the title of Emir, the great commander. With Samarkand under his control, Timur faced a critical dilemma. His army was made up of nomadic steppe warriors whose loyalty depended entirely on plunder. If he left them idle, they would eventually turn their weapons on him. To preserve his rule, he had to keep them marching. Timur engineered one of the most disciplined military systems in history. He organized his horsemen into strict tactical units of tens, hundreds, and thousands, combining traditional steppe archers with heavy cavalry and advanced siege equipment. His strategy relied on a terrifying psychological weapon: absolute choice. Cities that surrendered immediately were spared and absorbed into his empire. Cities that resisted were made into graphic warnings for the rest of the world. When the Persian city of Isfahan revolted against his tax collectors in 1387, Timur's retribution was calculated and absolute. He ordered his soldiers to collect a quota of severed heads from the population. Outside the city's smoking ruins, his engineers constructed massive towers built entirely of over 70,000 human skulls. While his armies brought ruin across Persia and the Middle East, Timur used the stolen wealth of conquered nations to transform Samarkand into the grandest city on earth. He was a man of startling contradictions, a commander who built mountains of skulls, yet a literate scholar fluent in multiple languages who loved art and architecture. Whenever an enemy city fell, Timur gave his officers a strict command: identify every master craftsman, architect, mason, poet, and scholar, and spare their lives. Thousands of artisans were force-marched in chains from Damascus, Baghdad, and Isfahan back to Samarkand. Under Timur's personal direction, they constructed soaring mosques, wide avenues, and turquoise-domed mausoleums that shimmered in the desert heat. He wanted every foreign ambassador who entered Samarkand to understand one thing: the ruler who resided here was not merely a warlord, but the undisputed center of the civilized world. By 1398, Timur was in his 60s, an age when most medieval rulers had long passed away. Instead of resting, he turned his sights toward the rich Sultanate of Delhi in northern India, claiming its rulers were far too lenient with their non-Muslim subjects. He led his army across the freezing passes of the Hindu Kush Mountains and descended into the Indian plains. Outside Delhi's walls, the Sultan deployed a terrifying force: hundreds of massive war elephants clad in mail armor with poison-dipped tusks. Timur's cavalry began to panic. Timur remained completely calm. He ordered his men to load pack camels with dry straw, set the straw ablaze, and drive the burning animals straight toward the elephant line. Panicked by the wall of fire and screeches, the war elephants stampeded backward, trampling their own infantry. Timur's cavalry swept through the shattered ranks. Delhi was sacked so completely that contemporary records noted the city lay virtually silent for decades. At the height of his power, Timur faced the only rival who could match his reputation, Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I, known as the Thunderbolt. Bayezid was a brilliant military strategist who had been smashing Christian crusader armies across Europe. As their empires expanded toward each other, the two conquerors exchanged deeply insulting letters, each demanding the other's total surrender. In July 1402, their vast armies collided at the Battle of Ankara in modern-day Turkey. It was one of the largest military engagements of the Middle Ages, two undefeated conquerors fighting for supreme dominance over the Islamic world. Timur outmaneuvered the Ottoman Sultan before a single arrow was fired. Days before the battle, he diverted the regional river, leaving Bayezid's soldiers marching in heavy armor without water during a scorching summer heatwave. When the battle began, Timur activated secret pacts he had made with Bayezid's regional troops, causing them to desert mid-combat. The Ottoman lines collapsed, and Sultan Bayezid was captured, the only time in history an Ottoman sultan was taken alive on the field. In a single afternoon, Timur had broken the greatest military power in Western Asia. Timur returned to Samarkand as the master of an empire stretching from the Mediterranean Sea to the borders of China. He had smashed the Golden Horde in Russia, destroyed the Delhi Sultanate, crippled the Ottoman Empire, and subdued Persia. Yet, as he approached 70, his thirst for conquest remained unquenched. Only one great empire remained beyond his grasp: Ming Dynasty China. In late 1404, despite failing health and one of the coldest winters in recorded history, Timur assembled an army of over 200,000 men and began the long march east toward the Chinese border. The rivers were frozen solid, and snow buried the mountain passes, but the aging conqueror refused to wait for spring. His body finally reached its limit. In February 1405, at the frontier town of Farab, Timur collapsed from a severe illness brought on by the bitter cold. Surrounded by his grieving generals, the Iron Emir realized he had finally met an adversary he could not defeat. He died in his winter tent, thousands of miles short of his final goal. Timur's body was brought back to Samarkand and interred beneath a massive slab of dark green jade inside the Guri Emir mausoleum. Above his tomb, an inscription was carved into the stone as a cold warning to the future: "When I arise from the dead, the world shall tremble." Without his terrifying willpower to hold it together, Timur's vast empire fractured within a generation as his descendants fought over the land. Yet his lineage endured. His great-great-grandson Babur would ride south to conquer India and establish the magnificent Mughal Empire, reshaping the Asian continent once more. Timur remains one of history's most complex and terrifying figures. A man who carved his name into the earth through unimaginable devastation, yet built monuments of breathtaking beauty that still stand in Central Asia today. He proved that a single individual born without a throne and crippled by war could redraw the map of the world through sheer force of will. He arrived like a storm, ruled through iron discipline, and left behind a world that would never be the same again.